one topic in the trans community that no one really likes to talk about, and that is detransitioners. They make up about 8% of people who have transitioned, and no one in the community really likes to acknowledge them. But I think we should. As a trans person myself, I think it's extremely important to hear what detrans folks have to say about their experiences and why they decided to detransition. In this video, I want to highlight some of these detrans folks, see what they have to say about the trans community and the struggles they faced while coming to terms that they were going to detransition.
My name is Layla Jane. I'm 18 years old and I am a woman who has detransitioned. I am actively suing Kaiser Permanente, and I'm suing the doctors that gave me those treatments related to my transition.
I think you're one of the youngest detransitioners other than myself that I know of, and you actually started transitioning a year earlier than I did, and 2 years before I got my mastectomy. You were 12 when you started taking testosterone blockers, right?
Yeah.
Were you on blockers?
Initially, yeah, they started me on Lupron and then they put me on testosterone.
You got your mastectomy at 13, just a few years after you started puberty. And that makes me upset personally. How do you feel about that? What's it like dealing with that?
It's very conflicting, but honestly, I'm very upset that it was done to me so young, and also not to mention in a headspace where I just shouldn't have been able to make those kind of decisions. You know, I actually had never seen like a diagram of like a breast and like the organ and like the lactation like organs, like the glands and all that, until really recently I saw a diagram. They never showed anything like that to me, and they really watered it down and just called it top surgery, not a radical...
Not a double mastectomy.
Double mastectomy, what it was, right?
So I know a lot of people have a lot of feelings about kids who transition and how old someone should be when they transition. I personally am of the belief that social transition for kids is the best way, and then if you and your doctors decide to go on puberty blockers and hormones, that kind of thing, I personally don't think people should be getting surgeries until they're about maybe 16, 17, 18. I definitely think that 13 was way too young for this to happen, and I genuinely feel sorry for this person. It's a very nuanced conversation, and it is something that needs to be discussed with each individual patient. Doctors need to inform people so much better than they do. I'm very lucky that when I had my top surgery consultation, the doctor did go into everything. He explained everything to me. Knowing that there are doctors out here that aren't informing people, and especially aren't informing parents and kids as young as 13, that's not okay. I don't personally think that's okay. So I really do feel for this person. I really feel bad for her that is something that she went through, and that is why I think it's important to have these kind of conversations. But I don't think people who go through this should blame the trans community. I think they need to blame the doctors that are doing this and not being truthful with their patients or giving their patients as much information. That's why I think it's a really important thing to talk about detransitioners, especially the ones who went through it when they were younger, because a lot of those people unfortunately wound up like falling through the cracks, and this kind of stuff happens, and it's just sad to see, because then it affects trans people and trans kids that genuinely need this kind of thing. It's just really sad to me, and I think that's gonna be like the overall theme for me personally. This video is that it's hard to come to terms that you're trans, and then thinking you're trans for how many years, and then realizing you're not. That must be very, very complicated, and I can't imagine what that's like. So yeah, I think that's just going to be the theme of this video. Just trying to be as respectful as possible and realizing that unfortunately there are people that do have this happen to them. But that doesn't mean there aren't young trans people out there that don't need this kind of care. So I think this is so important because I genuinely think there's so many detrans people that take out their anger on the trans community, which again, I personally don't think is necessarily fair to have transition, then detransition and be like, oh, trans people aren't real just because I'm not trans. I definitely think it's on the doctors and on the professionals that you're working with. And I mean, sometimes you just don't know and then you figure it out, and like, that's okay. But you shouldn't use your detransition to then go ahead and be transphobic. Trans men are men, trans women are women. I understand being angry and upset and feeling disheartened and that your body doesn't look the way you want it to, because trust me, my body doesn't look the way I want it to. I completely understand. But that doesn't mean that you should take it out on the whole community and go completely transphobic. It just means that it wasn't right for you. So I definitely feel like the large amount of detransitioners we see, especially online, that talk about it are the kind of people that are transphobic and talk about how horrible it is and that kind of thing, which it's their experience. I'm not going to say that's not their experience, but you really shouldn't be taking it out on the full trans community because you didn't end up being trans.
This video, what I want to talk about, the bad parts of testosterone.
So let's talk about this. Hi, if you've never seen me before, my name is Lucy Kartikasari. I'm a detrans woman looking to defang transphobia I see on the internet with my experiences as a detrans person. This video is fearmongering. This is exactly what you see on Twitter. People saying that this and this and this is going to happen to your body if you take testosterone. Your beautiful feminine body is going to be destroyed. I took testosterone for 8.5 years. I never experienced any of the things that Nadine listed in her video. Moreover, I never heard about anyone experiencing these effects aside from vaginal atrophy, but never to the point of sepsis. Yes, there are some changes that are irreversible when you take hormone. When you take testosterone, yes, your vocal cords thicken, and yes, you do grow more body. In my experience, the only thing that was truly permanent for me is the fact that my voice changed. Yes, I grew facial hair, but I had it lasered off. And if I really wanted to, I could voice train so I could talk like this all the time.
If I relaxed, I could talk like this instead.
But these are just effects. They are neutral. These effects only have values ascribed to them when you frame them within the context of your experience. There was a time where having facial hair made me happy and I considered it a good thing. And then later on in my life, that was no longer the case, and so I underwent procedures to remove it. But that is my experience. It is not the experience of every person. If there are trans masks who have experienced indeed that choking sensation when their voice drops, this is something that needs to be studied. That needs to be examined so we can improve trans healthcare. If there are these so-called negative effects to testosterone, wouldn't it be more prudent for us to actually use that in improving trans healthcare as a whole, not scaring young trans people away from care that is life-saving to them? I'm not a fan of the tone policing that happens to a lot of detrans people whenever we open our mouths on the internet. However, I do understand that as a detrans person, my words carry a lot of weight when it comes to discussing trans healthcare. As such, I think it's very important for us to carefully consider our words whenever we speak about gender-affirming care. We must speak carefully to ensure that our words are not twisted for transphobia. We certainly should not be making videos with catastrophizing language such as the dark side of testosterone to the tune of 3 million views. Speak thoughtfully.
I love her. I love Lucy. She's one of my favorite detransitioner, content creators, and I'll link her down below because all of her content is very educational and I absolutely adore her. All of her points are spot on. I think it is important for detrans people to be able to talk about their experiences. However, like she said, using catastrophizing language and that kind of thing, it hurts who are looking into gender affirming care, life-saving care. And for many trans people, this is the way that they stay alive, is through hormones, surgeries, different things to be done to your body. It's literally what is the medical diagnosis and way to treat gender dysphoria. So having someone who is detransitioned come on the internet and, like she said, have 3 million people see this and be like, oh, all of these horrible things are going to happen to me if I go on testosterone. And if those people are trans and are now scared off of it, they have the potential to lose their lives because someone was fear-mongering. It is unfortunate. This wasn't the right care you needed. However, that doesn't mean it isn't the care someone else needs, that trans people need to stay alive. Because unfortunately, there are a lot of detrans people who go to their states and actively are trying to ban these kinds of things. It's so weird to me because no one cares when cis kids or cis people get gender affirming care. People put their cis kids on hormone blockers. People put their cis kids on hormones because they're not developing certain things. Just because you're not trans doesn't mean that trans people shouldn't be getting the care they need. And I think that's why it's important to talk about it and hear from detrans folks, because they were once part of the community and they do have their experiences. But like Lucy said, there is a way to go about talking about your experience without having your words be twisted or twisting your words into blatant transphobia and fear-mongering for people who genuinely need this kind of medical attention. So I think this is incredibly important to talk about. There are many reasons why someone would detransition, and one of them is because of social acceptance. Trans people still have very little social acceptance in honestly all societies. It's something that most people don't think about or don't want to accept, that trans people are in fact real. Like, God, there is a percentage of detrans people who transitioned and had to detransition because they weren't accepted from their family, their friends, job. The state that they live in literally banned it, or the country that they live in doesn't allow that kind of thing. Just because someone detransitioned doesn't mean that they're not trans anymore. There are plenty of people who just need to detransition for the social implications of it. I personally don't know what that would be like. As someone who found out my identity in my late teens and early 20s, it's hard for me to imagine going back to how I was before. But there are people who it's a necessity that they do that, and they have to do that for safety reasons. So I think as the trans community, I know we tend to demonize detrans people because a lot of them do speak about their negative experiences. But there is a whole community of detrans people who still identify as trans. They just literally cannot transition for safety, social implications, and it sucks. It sucks that we are at a point in society that people can't authentically be themselves. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below how you wish detrans people were talked about, listened to, how their experiences were shared. I definitely think it's something in the trans community and non-binary community that we need to start talking about a little bit more, bringing light to people and letting them know that, hey, we're here for you and your experiences are valid, but it never excuses actual transphobia. Thank you all again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.